Hi guys, it's Salibonani and welcome back to my channel. So if you're new here, welcome. My name's Prim and I'm a working mum of one. I love all things to do with beauty, makeup, skincare. I love sharing a little bit about how we live our life and what we do as a little family, as well as sharing some unique bits about my motherhood journey and things that I'm experiencing. So if you're interested in finding out a little bit more about who I am and the type of content I have, then definitely stick around. Don't forget to click on the subscribe button as well so you can keep in touch. In today's video, it's all about the misconceptions that people tend to have when I mention that we live with in-laws, what that means, what that looks like as a young British African family. You know, in sort of circumstances like that, I think it's not common anymore and people just don't know what to expect. So it's kind of something that we still see a lot in Asian communities in some parts, but we don't really hear about it as often anymore. It's kind of something that maybe most people think is outdated. So if you want to find out a little bit more about why we moved in with my husband's family, then you can watch one of my previous videos. But in this video, I'm going to tackle some of the myths, hopefully debunk them for anyone that might be curious about what it's like to live with in-laws, but also just generally around relationships with in-laws. So I'm gonna count down the ones that I get the most whenever I have a conversation and just mention that we live in a multi-generational home. So I think the first one is that your relationship with your in-laws must be perfect, and I just don't think that's true. I don't think any relationship can be perfect, but I definitely think that if you are coming into a shared space, then it's definitely all about being positive and being able to adapt. So just be mindful that how you do things is very different from how other families do things, and you just need to kind of like go with the flow and find each other. Definitely try your best not to get easily offended as well, because maybe how you say something and how someone else says something is very, very different. So I think that's one of the first things that I really just want to cut out and say. It doesn't mean that you're like absolutely best friends. You're still getting to know each other and you have to be open to that process. So no, you don't have to be best friends with your in-laws to live with them, but you do have to be, you know, respectful and mature about it. So another big one that we get quite a lot whenever I bring this up is that your in-laws are then going to raise your children. So for us, we have quite young parents on both sides. I think our parents are like mid-50s, so they're still professionals. They still have ambitions. They still have their own things that they like to do, their own hobbies and interests. So in essence, living at home isn't like free childcare or a ticket to just kind of doing your own thing. Grandparents are there to lovingly support nurturing the children, but again, you're mindful that you don't want it to be burdensome on your end where you're in their space as well. So you want it to just be nice, and we've had times where our little one will go and sleep with grandparents or different things like that, or you know, pop out and go to town with them, just that kind of thing. But it's never really like a given where I expect that every morning my mother-in-law is going to give him a bath or anything like that. No. However, we do have little things like, you know, first thing in the morning, granddad here is an early riser, so normally weekday, weekend, my little one is up quite early as well, so he just pops down and he'll hang out with granddad. They've got their own breakfast routine. Granddad knows what his favourites are, and they'll have a cup of tea together. Well, Riley will have juice, but you know, that kind of thing. So they've got their own little understanding and their own little bond, but it's never a thing where my in-laws feel pressurised or they feel like, oh no, they have to do everything for my little one. And on the other hand, you know, there's a balance as well for me where I don't feel like there's excessive input in how I should be bringing up my child or nurturing him. Whenever things are a little bit challenging, if we're doing like a discipline exercise like naughty step and grandparents are a little bit uncomfortable, my father-in-law is particularly good at this. He'll just excuse himself and he'll say, oh, do you know what, I'll pop back in about 20 minutes time, just give you a chance to do what you're doing, because naturally as a grandparent his thing is to say, oh, come here, or he would want to then, you know, make him feel better if he's having a tantrum and crying. But I'll be going through, let's say, like a method where he needs to cry out, and then we reason with him. So situations like that, we both work around it, but again, always with respect and mindfulness towards each other. So he gives me my room to be mummy and to discipline, but I also give them their room to, you know, be loving and doting on our little one as well in equal measure. The other one that we get, which is really, really popular, the third one, is that your mother-in-law must control your husband, or they control their sons, which I don't think is true. I think it might be in some situations, depending on the person's personality and the context of what that control might be. I've found that in our relationship, actually, my mother-in-law is actually very mindful and respectful of what my husband wants. And he in turn has sort of set a tone where he's mindful about what I want. So there's like a nice balance. There's never really any sense of someone telling another person what to do. If there are any queries or any advice that's being given, it's always given in like quite a nice, respectful tone. So I think I'm quite fortunate in that. I feel like she is respectful of him as a man. She gives him his position, which allows us to also kind of have our own family dynamic as a three within the bigger home, which is really, really lovely. Because then, you know, we've had examples where my mother-in-law will ask me if my husband can do something instead of just going directly to him, which I think is lovely, and it just makes it so much easier. So like I mentioned, the key things that normally come up really are down to, is our relationship perfect? How does it impact on raising the children? Are we dictated to? Are children raised for us? And thirdly, does the mother-in-law control the son? And in essence, I think I've kind of answered that and said, you know, it kind of depends on what the situation is. But I think there are a few things to remember if you are considering living with in-laws and what to be mindful of. So the conversations you have with you and your partner are really, really important so that you can be a united unit. But also, I would really encourage people to remember that this is new to the in-laws as much as it's new to you. So definitely exercise a lot of patience. Be mindful that they're probably anxious, don't know what to expect as well, especially if it's their first time. So be the one to break the ice and try your best to kind of forge that relationship directly, instead of sort of always going through this shared person. I think I said it in a previous video as well, trying to find some common ground. It really, really makes it easier in kind of just totally debunking these misconceptions that people tend to kind of have around living with in-laws. I think it just adds to fear and anxiety, but in the current climate and society that we live in, it's really like a viable situation for young families. The renting market is just so difficult for people depending on your circumstances and how you're doing things. It just makes it near impossible to raise a deposit. So if you are in a position to consider living with family, then don't get bogged down with some of the things that people might say or ask. Kind of do your own sense check, assess how the people you're dealing with are, and then, you know, weigh up the pros and cons really. Don't be discouraged. Until the next video, guys, let me know in the comments below what you guys think about some of the other myths that normally come out when it's linked to living with in-laws, and have you had an experience yourself. Until the next video, guys, thank you so much for watching as always. Take care, and don't forget to like and subscribe.